Rose is the definitive episode of New Doctor Who. I mean, it had to perform. It was a revival of the best show ever to have graced our TV screens, and it does just that. Performs. We are introduced to Rose, as the title clearly suggests, who is the main focal point of the episode. We follow her journey from bed to work, brilliantly complemented with the first new song from the brand new soundtrack composed by the fantastic new composer Murray Gold, with the song itself being called Westminster Bridge. Rose, played by Billie Piper, was to be the new companion. This companion-dedicated episode explores her daily routine as a 19-year-old modern-day girl with a dead-end job, who's about to have her life changed forever. Rose is tasked with delivering a letter to her colleague, but is indeed greeted by the newly designed Autons disguised as shop window dummies and controlled by the Nestene consciousness. It's here when we first meet Ninth Doctor Christopher Eccleston, who pointedly says to Rose, "Run," as his first line. This has of course been the first on-screen appearance of the Doctor since the 1996 TV movie where the great Paul McGann was at the helm of the TARDIS. I mean, is it just me that kind of likes it? No, okay, I guess it was a bit cringy, and the whole part human thing on his mother's side is a piece of canon I think we can all either take or leave. Anyway, we as Whovians have not seen the Doctor since the 1996 TV movie, as I just previously mentioned, but it is insinuated early on that this is the next incarnation after 8, but a Doctor that has been through a devastating experience that has not yet been fully explained. This would therefore go on to be one of the main plot elements of Series 1. All we could do was assume that he is post-regeneration, taking into account the scene in Rose's flat, where the Doctor looks in the mirror and remarks over his ears and how it could have been worse. Indeed, we can also only assume that this is the next incarnation after Paul McGann, and at this point in time, this will be the only explanation we receive until 2013's War Doctor became the buffer between the two, and perfectly explained the regeneration of McGann through to her and then onwards to Eccleston. However, this is the Doctor we all knew and loved from the classic series, but adapted perfectly for modern viewership, while still retaining the key qualities of previous incarnations that have been so successful. It must be said, the use of the classic villains, the Autons, was an effective piece of nostalgia by RTD, as it contextualises the show and helps to link the new adaptation of the show to the classic era. Their appearance in this story just gives off a sense of excellence, something so new, much like in their first appearance in John Pertwee's first story, Spearhead from Space, where the newly regenerated Third Doctor found his feet whilst battling against a threat so strong and mysterious as the Autons. Something that helped his Doctor, and does something similar when introducing the audience to 9. Acting as shop window dummies, the Autons, later revealed as being controlled by the Nestene consciousness, some lovely nods back to Spearhead yet again, falling well within the established continuity previously, really do work as the main antagonists in this episode, as they hide in plain sight and can easily spring at an attack at any time, and do just that. As the threat of this opening episode of the revived series, it simply works and demonstrates how they were not afraid to tie the show to its roots, whilst also making efforts to breathe elements of new life into it in the modern era. The story itself, in Rose, it clearly achieves all of its aims. It reintroduces the Doctor to a modern audience through the fantastic Christopher Eccleston. It reintroduces the TARDIS with a brand new exterior and interior coral design shell, still adopting that classic and deeply iconic sound that all the fans love, and introducing a new companion in Rose who will go on to be a staple element of the RTD era. And I must say, that first shot we get of the TARDIS, partnered with the fantastic soundtrack in the background, now, that gives me chills every single time. So too does that first time we see Eccleston pilot the TARDIS, where 5 minutes before we enter, we see the new TARDIS through the perspective of Rose, something so cleverly done by RTD, and credit here needs to go to director Keith Boak with that fantastic sweeping shot of the interior, which is indeed shot and lit to perfection. The green interior glow is fantastic, no pun intended, of course, and really allows the audience to acknowledge how the TARDIS operates and how it is alive, bursting with energy, flowing up and down the time rotor, and perfectly introducing the time machine to the modern audience, and especially those who had not seen the classic series then. You know, it just really exaggerated how special this machine is. So the reintroduction of the well-established character of the Doctor was indeed no mean feat, but to say that Christopher Eccleston completely smashes it is indeed the understatement of the century. In his then 9th incarnation, we receive a new Doctor fresh from the axe of the Time War, which we didn't get a confirmation of until the end of the world at the end. A damaged Doctor looking for an escape, which he visualises in Rose. It has to be said that Christopher Eccleston completely embodies the character of the Doctor. His conviction of lines, comedic timing, use of facial expressions are all an act of perfection, and it's hard to see how he can improve from this debut performance, but we all know that he does. I do think the costume is very Doctor-like. No dress sense, the Time Lords, but indeed this exemplifies that in a much more subtle way than other incarnations, it has to be said. It is very well suited to his incarnation and his incarnation alone, being post-war, especially now you consider the events of Day of the Doctor. It is reserved and simplistic, not bombastic or elegant, not eccentric or colourful, reserved, and that is perfect for who the Ninth Doctor is and who he continues to be through the fantastic character development throughout Series 1. It's easy to compliment the actor himself, of course, even though he should receive all his plaudits. It also needs to go to Russell T Davies' writing, as through his excellent way of storytelling, we now had a new series that would inspire a brand new, spanking new generation of Whovians, including myself. His scripts were that of art, evident here through the use of gripping dialogue, fascinating characters, and his adaptation of the character of the Doctor that makes the viewer just want more and will make them want to watch the next episode. Something I feel is rather lacking in much more latter Doctor Who, throughout the Moffat era, but another element I absolutely adore within this episode is the character of Clive, played excellently by the magnificent Mark Benson. And I must say, why Big Finish have never picked this up, I do not know. Because his character is just fantastic and I feel like could have been explored a lot more. I do believe he is one of the best parts about this episode, and to this day is rather criminally, in my opinion, killed by an Auton during the invasion. I don't really understand why they did that, because I feel like they could have explored that character a bit more, and interactions with Clive and the Doctor himself might have been rather interesting, but that's just me. He added the right amount of exposition required for this episode and allows the character of Rose to develop even from that early stage of the series. I mean, is it just me, or did everyone else just want to see more info or pictures of the Doctor he had? I mean, for all we know, he could have been following for a long time. Opportunity wasted, but it's something I always say on every rewatch, and believe me, there's been a few. A special mention needs to go to Murray Gold, though, whose music in this episode is excellent, not to mention a new and updated theme, a theme I indeed love to this day. A theme that embodies Doctor Who and exemplifies the TARDIS' ability to travel backwards and forwards in time superbly, especially to a new audience in the modern era who might not have been familiar with the logistics of the TARDIS and the time travel elements. The blue and red time vortex effect acts as two polar opposites and highlights the time travel element extraordinarily, especially to the new viewers at the time who didn't know the functionalities of the show, as I just said. Furthermore, on every rewatch, and of course there's been quite a few, the original songs introduced within this episode are something I praise every single time, and they are indeed something of perfection. Westminster Bridge and Nine's theme come to mind specifically when praising Gold's work. Some excellent songs, to say the least. This is simply the start of what would become some thoroughly entertaining pieces of sound throughout the RTD era by Murray Gold, and many elements of Moffat's era also, although it can be said that Gold does start to dip off from Series 6 onwards, but there's still some really, heartwarming songs, especially that Rings of Akhaten song, the name slips my mind. Anyway, moving on. The man is indeed a god when it comes to the building of tension, the trials and tribulations of episode, and the sheer scale of adventure throughout each series. And this is embodied in Series 1 specifically, and I think is a reason why people look fondly on this series so much, especially me. I love it so much. So the episode of Rose is always something I look back on fondly, as I'm sure many fellow Whovians do. It's superb in every way, and it's simply the start of something so excellent in Series 1. I cannot begin to describe it in simple terms. If I was to give this episode a score out of 10, however, I would say an 8 out of 10. The characters, the threat of the Autons, Rose, and the Ninth Doctor are all explored excellently, as well as the introduction of the new TARDIS. However, I do always feel Mickey doesn't get off to the most amazing start, especially when he's turned into the Auton, and I don't know, something about that character just grinds my gears always, and especially that scene when he gets pulled into the bin. I mean, come on, you can't stop laughing at that on every rewatch. And it's easy to say the special effects could be a lot better, but for the time, I think they honestly could have been. They just needed a bit more polishing, but it's only marginal elements that dip on the score of 2. So overall, absolutely fantastic. So thank you for watching. That's been my review of Rose. Do like and subscribe to stay up to date with all the new videos I'm planning to make. No promises though, we're all busy people. Thank you very much. Goodbye.